please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Well, isn't this just fantastic? Captain's Log, Subdates 230102.5. There were plans last year to deal with Subfleet, so we're going to start those now by getting rid of the people that back them. Irate Alex is first. We're going to make him fat, like Dainty Moment type situation fat. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk about trans athletes. Touchy subject, a tricky subject. One I have often moved to the second channel or over to BitChute, where I have spoken about Laurel Hubbard, the powerlifter, now retired powerlifter. There are many differing points of view when it comes to the inclusion of trans athletes in men's categories or women's categories. Some have correctly pointed out to me that in some sports it's not called the men's, it's called the open category, where women can compete as well. But it isn't where we're going to be going today, is it? There's an obvious reason why, and that is in most sports, women, if they compete against the men, will more than likely lose. Why? Because if it's athletics, men have a distinct advantage. That is not to say that women cannot compete with the men, only that they will struggle to keep up with the men. It is why the world records for certain races are so different, and you can take this back to sports where you might not think there'd be such an advantage, like darts, and you will still see a huge disparity. There is also disparity in support, but to be honest, that's not relevant today. Instead, I want to talk about a rising star called Leah Thomas. And for this, we have two articles to cover concerning Leah Thomas. I will insert a disclaimer now. There are many sports where trans athletes have not been permitted to compete in the category they choose to identify with, because a number of the highest authorities in the land, i.e. governing bodies, have determined trans athletes to have advantages over their respective gender counterparts. This in turn has led to much in the way of gender critical discussion, argument, debate, or cancellation if you're that person. There are many athletes who themselves are biologically female that do not believe those who are not born biologically female should be allowed to compete with biological females, because it seems many records have been shattered, because it seems they are ahead of the curve. They've retained the advantages from the youth and brought them into adulthood, and in turn are annihilating their biologically female counterparts, which rather amusingly to me has led to them also being cancelled for being trans exclusionary. I have taken a stance where I believe that the only way realistically to end this would be to create a trans category, which would be highly impractical, and no doubt eventually there'd be a non-binary category. There might well be a furry category. How about a brony category as well? Needless to say, I can't roll my eyes any further than I already have, but if I could, they would have already done a 360. Leah Thomas rose to notoriety when back in March, Leah won the NCAA Division I Women's 500-yard freestyle, which is either a vast improvement on where Leah Thomas was when Leah Thomas was male, and between 500th and 600th in the country in the male division, or a damning statement of the disparity between men and women, which for the sake of it I'm going to reserve judgment on until we cover a bit more, because we have to insert somebody else into this who takes great umbrage with Leah Thomas existing at all in women's categories for swimming, and that is Riley Gaines, a Star College swimmer from the University of Kentucky, who is not a fan. So much so, they have absolutely flayed Leah Thomas for tone-deaf remarks that Leah has made, and also what Leah Thomas has done as far as helping, elevating women's sports. Now we're going to dive into the articles. I'm going to preface this with the following. There are two, and they're both from right-leaning sources, okay? But you need them because they're the only ones that actually covered it with the full context of what Riley Gaines had to say about Leah Thomas, who throughout an entire interview referred to Leah Thomas by what is more commonly known as a dead name. I shall refrain from using that because I can't be arsed with the inevitable snowflakes in my comments accusing me of being transphobic. Get a life. Touch grass. Lick a battery. In an ad for ESPN, Leah Thomas had said that she felt humbled and honoured to win a Division I championship, also saying, I can only hope I am able to give other trans people the inspiration and motivation I was given. For Riley Gaines, this went down like a lump of lead. So in an interview with Fox News on the Ingraham Angle show, she said, "To me, hearing that, all I hear is selfishness. I hear a lack of self-awareness, and I hear utter disregard and disrespect toward women. Women who have dedicated their entire lives to their sport." The guest host for that show, Raymond Arroyo, asked Riley Gaines if women continue to have equal access to sports, while government and schools force them to compete with transgender athletes, with Riley Gaines saying, "Absolutely not. This is taking us back to the 1970s, to before Title IX, and that's what I think the left is not understanding. They think this is progressive. Many times over the years I've been on YouTube, I have covered Title IX. It is part of the Education Amendments Act of 1972. It prohibits sex-based discrimination in any school or any other education program that receives funding from the federal government, which led to many lawsuits when the Dear Colleague letter of Barack Obama did its rounds and gave the colleges the power to presume guilt before innocence, with zero proof to prove the guilt. Not even a joke. Colleges lost vast amounts of money because of those lawsuits. And I call them lawsuits because they never needed to happen had the schools simply done the investigations properly or handed it over to authorities. I firmly believe that no college, no school should have that kind of jurisdiction and/or power. Ever. Anyone remember the Rolling Stone article that was later proven to be utter nonsense, bollocks, tripe, crap? Insert additional words here. Yeah, the glory days, everyone. The point Riley Gaines is trying to make is, while it's right to include trans people within sports, by doing so, somebody who holds a biologically male advantage is taking away opportunities and prizes from biologically female athletes. So does this limit the access of biological women? The short answer is yes, it absolutely does. Many places set rules for how long you've been transitioning for before you can compete in certain sports. This in turn limits your advantages because of things like testosterone. She also said that if you're looking at just off sheer statistics, nothing opinionated about this, Leah Thomas the year before when competing as, dead name, was ranked in the 500s at best. A year later, Leah Thomas ended up winning a national title, being the fastest female in the country, and then being nominated for NCAA Women of the Year. Nothing about what I just said is an opinion, and if it frustrates someone or makes them upset, I think that speaks volumes. Spoiler, Leah Thomas did not win NCAA Woman of the Year. That went to fencer Sylvie Binder. Oddly enough, Leah Thomas and Riley Gaines have competed against each other, both finishing 5th in the NCAA Championships back in March, the 200-yard freestyle. Congratulations to Riley Gaines there. But I didn't realize we handed out awards for participation. Now, sarcastic dickhead comments aside, there is a lot more to this that also makes Riley Gaines very uncomfortable, and it concerns safeguarding for women. On the face of it, sounds like a nothing burger, I'm sure, to many of you. But the problem is quite intimate, and Riley has some words for that as well, which is what I'm going to read next. Earlier this year, Riley Gaines slammed President Joe Biden, according to the article there, for proposing to change the definition of sex in a federal civil rights law to include gender and gender identity. This reminds me of the recent passing, after much contention, of gender recognition laws in Scotland, where instead of going to a doctor to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria, you can just say you are whatever you want to be, essentially, and you're it. Congratulations. With many critics of that saying you're now just further silencing women. Changes to Title IX would therefore allow transgender female athletes to compete against biological women in sports. By doing so, Riley Gaines wrote in an essay that biological women would be placed at a disadvantage when competing against transgender women. In this same essay, which is where we get to the point that I was earlier making, Riley used the opportunity to recount how she was forced to share a locker room with Leah Thomas at the NCAA Championships back in March, where she wrote, "At the NCAA Championships, I saw a 6'4" male exposing male parts in our women's locker room. To be perfectly clear, the anatomy I and many other women were forced to view confirms Thomas is a male." She also said that she'd approached the National Collegiate Athletic Association officials, where she could change, as I had no intention of undressing in front of a man. They informed me that there were no protections in place for me to change in a space that Thomas did not have access to. To summarize, the NCAA put the onus on the female to avoid undressing in front of a biological man with biological parts who is sexually attracted to women. Let that sink in. Now, it is worth adding some political bias into this. Riley Gaines is a big backer of former President Donald Trump. No doubt this will polarize many of you who are watching. I'm more interested in the discussion itself of trans athletes competing in certain sports. But I do want to add the context so you can then summarily either roll your eyes and call her a TERF, fob her off, pigeonhole her and move on, or consider what the options are and the opinions of those who feel vulnerable and like they are not being heard. Former President Trump asked Riley Gaines to join him while he discussed his intention to ban transgender women from competing in women's sports. Before she took to the stage, she shared her thoughts on the issue. Basically, all I want to say is that it takes a brain and common sense and 5th grade biology level understanding to realize that this is blatantly unfair. It is completely obvious. Briefly reiterating that idea at the podium alongside Donald Trump by saying, I'm just gonna say keep female sports female. I'm assuming at some point someone's gonna actually answer the question, a politician that is, what is a woman? Because I remember back in 2015-2016, the discussion was about equality for women. Now though, many of those that were arguing that feel that they are under attack because their voices are no longer worth anything when it comes to the discussion of equality, or because they feel that what was once a loud, proud voice has become toxic, polluted, contaminated by an invader, an interloper, with a Y chromosome and a ding-a-ling. Now earlier I stated, organisers, governing bodies, some, make it quite clear you have to have a low testosterone level that's recorded as such for a certain period of time. USA swimming rules indicate that athletes have to have a recorded low level of testosterone for 36 months or 3 years to then compete in female categories. Leah Thomas started taking hormone therapy while still competing as a male back in May of 2019. That meant Leah Thomas did not qualify the NCAA championships, but the NCAA said that she would be allowed to compete because they were refusing to adopt the threshold in 2021, with the committee saying the subcommittee decided implementing additional changes at this time could have unfair and potentially detrimental impacts on schools and student athletes intending to compete in 2022 NCAA Women's Swimming Championships. What I'm hearing here is, you've taken a goalpost and you moved it because optics. You took the goalpost and moved it because... why? Oh, it's progressive, right? That 4-letter word that I couldn't care less about. Many opinions on this are then by extension of the own rules being omitted, enhanced, because it turns out you don't obey your own rules and you don't provide a good enough reason why. And in doing so, you therefore elevate the voices of those who believe people like Leah Thomas hold a distinct advantage, one that you may as well have just confirmed as such. How tragic.